welcome to STARCAST from Planet Waves. I'm Eric Francis Coppolino, your friendly neighborhood astrologer, author of the Planet Waves horoscope, and host of Planet Waves FM on Pacifica Radio. Thank you for joining me. This is the edition that goes with the weekly horoscope and the first in my election roundup summary series of articles. This is going to take a little time and bandwidth and reflection to unravel. Before I talk about that, I want to thank those who participated in Tuesday night's Election Returns 4-hour live edition of Planet Waves TV. We had a pretty good audience, considering that we don't really do live video, or we haven't up until now, but I think that we will be doing more of that in the future. It was just so much fun, and I was happy to have something creative and productive to do and people to hang out with on election night. It mitigated the whatever you want to call it, the blow of what was in any event going to be a challenging and difficult story to report. And in my article tonight, I talk about the I think the basic reality that this overwhelming win by Trump was a reflection of people's minds under digital conditions where, not a lot of reality matters. Now, the problem was that Harris was a perfectly terrible candidate. I think she has no business even being vice president or a senator. And so there was not really much of an alternative, and a lot of the people voting for Harris were voting against Trump. So there was nothing affirmative or particularly creative about that. However, what we have to reckon with was that Trump took all of the swing states and that he gained ground almost every place, and then they even beat Walz in his home district. So that tells you something. There's a lot to sort out here, and one of the things I do in my article is I relate this to digital conditions and talk about what it means to be kind of alive in a body in a time of disembodiment, and then I relate this to the 2025-26 astrology, which grows more incredible day by day as I look at it. I have already written an ebook about a 60-page overview, just the right length. If you read a couple of pages a day, it'll be great fun. And then I'm up to the fourth sign in the Awakening series of readings. And so apart from all the looking ahead that I've done and horoscopes finished out almost till the end of the year, every time I do a new one of these signs, I'm amazed by what I discover and the combinations that I put together and, combinations of influences. And I keep, referencing back for precedents for some of these developments that are happening, this astonishing astrology in Aries coming up. And then that is coupled with Pluto entering Aquarius for the final time. That takes place on the 19th. And then that accompanies Sedna in Gemini and then Uranus in Gemini. And so this is basically a year where everything is different from quite a ways back in the past. We are well finished with this whole Pluto in Capricorn insanity, where all you heard about was banks and large sums of money being transferred. By large sums, I mean in the trillions. And now with Pluto in Aquarius, I think we are going to hear no end about artificial intelligence. And also, I think some of the chickens of the digital era are going to come home to roost. And the pushback, though it is late and based on my study of media history, questionable whether it could possibly have an effect. The pushback against the complete absorption of humanity by the digital environment is coming under question. This has a name, by the way, and its name is the Fourth Industrial Revolution. That is the Great Reset. That is Agenda 2030. There's not a lot of names for this, but the one that is, I think, the most descriptive is the Fourth Industrial Revolution. And this was openly discussed by Klaus Schwab in his book that came out in 2020. In the thick of and the heat of COVID, he admits that this is part of the Great Reset. You can buy this book anywhere, and they describe their plans. This wealth class, it's not even really a ruling class, it's this class of people with absurd extreme wealth reshaping the world in the image of digital. And now we've got the Trump-Musk presidency, and these billionaires are all digital billionaires. And you wonder how it's happening, since all wealth comes from the earth, and this just seems like a lot of wealth that has not come from the earth. Anyway, I get into that in tonight's article, a horoscope as well, plotting the developments for all the signs and the rising signs, with the sun moving through Sagittarius and headed for a full moon in Taurus. No, sun moving through Scorpio, excuse me. Sometimes I forget when it is. Sun moving through Scorpio with a full moon coming Friday, 11/15/24. A couple of things about the current chart. As of right about now, the sun is approaching a conjunction to Pluto. Pluto, in the last 11 arc minutes of its time in Capricorn. I wish I could be teary-eyed and nostalgic about Pluto in Capricorn, but it has been a rough journey. I mean, there were a couple of bright spots. There were some bright spots in 2011. For example, I think that Occupy Wall Street was definitely one of the happier moments of Pluto in Capricorn. And Arab Spring, though that seems to have gone nowhere, was a happy moment of Pluto in Capricorn, as well as an event that seems to be completely forgotten, probably except by its organizers, the public labor union movement that erupted in Wisconsin, where people came out in support of labor unions of public service employees. That was a great moment. All of them happened right around the same time, between about March and about November 2011. Besides that, all we heard about were banking scandals, and there were massive bailouts. There were two massive recapitalizations, basically, of all the banks. In 2008, with Pluto newly in Capricorn, it seemed like 5 minutes into Pluto in Capricorn, they recapitalized the banks. Of course, this is done with debt, so they just charge up the credit cards that no one's ever going to pay off, and they put the money into the hands of the rich. And then, of course, they die, and they just leave the debt for posterity. It remains to be seen how this is going to be addressed. And I'd love it if any economist, is there anybody out there who's got an obsession with economics who listens to me, can tell me how much debt the United States ran up between 2008 and 2024 during Pluto in Capricorn. It seems to be the theme of Pluto in Capricorn. So anyway, we've got about 10 days left of this. It again began in January of 2008, I believe, right during the Obama-McCain thing. I think AIG failed. It was quite an incredible time. I mean, they seem to keep doing this banking failure thing. But anyway, I'm curious to discuss the economics, the macroeconomics of this with anybody into it. All right, so I have looked at these last moments of Pluto in Capricorn as being a kind of a tie up the loose ends moment. It's very unusual for an outer planet to make two retrogrades into the old sign. Even with Sedna, which takes 11,400 years to orbit the sun, many, many times longer than Pluto at 248 years, like 40 times longer. Sedna only retreated into Taurus once before moving on into Gemini, and it had been in Taurus since the 1960s, I think 1966. So we still have a week and a half left of this, and it's not too late if you have any business with the government that you want to tie up. I view it as a kind of a micro jubilee where you can just come in under the wire and get things done, file forms, bring yourself back into compliance. This afternoon, Thursday afternoon, I don't know what time you're listening to this, but I'm recording at 2:47 Standard Time in New York, but at 5:57, the moon enters Aquarius. But right before it does that, and really all through the afternoon, again Eastern Time, the moon is forming a conjunction to Pluto. So that's deep. That's a little dark, a little moody, a little intense. But then the moon enters Aquarius, and we begin the first quarter phase, which will be exact sometime on Friday. So quarter moon, especially waxing quarter moon, tends to have a kind of a refreshing feeling to it, and a sense of balance. I think quarter moon, it does not have that dark introspective feeling of the new moon or that wired feeling of the full moon, but rather a sense of equilibrium. All right, what else have I got to say to you? All right, let's take a look at some of these interplanet retrogrades coming up. Mercury just entered its shadow phase. That was maybe it was Wednesday or something. I don't know exactly what day, but it's in the shadow phase, or I call it the echo phase. Sometimes is when an inner planet, especially an inner planet, enters the degrees where it will be retrograde. So depending on how you measure the retrograde, you can extend it all the way from the beginning of one echo phase into the end of the second echo phase, so that the planet's going to cross the same degrees 3 times. It's going to go forward, then it's going to stop, then it's going to go back, and then it's going to go forward again, and then it's going to clear those degrees. And so there's the first echo, the retrograde, and the second echo. This, of course, is all an illusion created by the Earth passing in between the retrograde planet and the sun. So it's not really retrograde. It's a visual illusion, but nonetheless, the relative motion of the planet changes. And there's a lot of ways to look at them, but one of the most practical ways I've chosen to look at them is as a period of review, a period of cleanup. I think with interplanet retrogrades, it's good to pause on important new activity and wrap up, review, and finish up what you've begun in the past. And if you use them that way, they can be very productive times. And if nothing else, it's like a scheduled, retreat and cleanup. Don't we all wish we could clean up our desks more frequently? I mean, they tend to pile up so fast, even in a world that is digital. And despite my best efforts, I seem to churn up as much paper, well, less, but it's still a lot by most human standards, as I did during the analog age. And that cleaning up the desks, cleaning up the files, back up the computers, all of that very useful, particularly during Mercury retrograde. So this Mercury retrograde begins on Monday, November 25th, and it stations direct on Sunday, December 15th. The whole thing takes place in Sagittarius, and fortunately, Mercury does not go far out as to square Neptune, so we are spared a prolonged Mercury-Neptune square. But by sign, it is there, but we'll kind of skirt around that little extra flood. Meanwhile, Mars goes retrograde on the 6th of December, we're well into the Mars shadow phase. And so this Mars retrograde, I think, is going to be interesting. And if any shoes are going to drop like the other shoe drops in terms of the escapades with this most recent election, that is likely to happen around the time of Mars stationing retrograde. And one of the reasons I say that is because Mars is going to station retrograde exactly on the United States North Node. And the United States has Pholus, the second centaur, which is about a pressurized release, like shaving cream spraying out of the can. You can't put it back, or Mentos dropped into a bottle of soda. I've been in the supermarket like 500 times where they sell both 2-liter bottles of soda and Mentos. And I think probably the healthiest thing you could do is put the Mentos into the bottle of soda, and then the soda ejects itself all over the floor. Or don't do this inside. And I keep forgetting to do it. I guess I could write it on my shopping list, and then it would take even longer because I have this very strained relationship with shopping lists. Anyway, Mars on the North Node, opposite Pholus on the United States South Node. There is something going on there, and that Mars is going to sit there for a while. And then the Mars retrograde heats up again in early January, and then it is still going on during the inauguration. And if I recall correctly, there is an absolutely perfect to the arc minute square between retrograde Mars and Eris on the day of the inauguration. So we seem to have gotten through this particular election without riots in the streets and the results being delayed. It really seems as if the people handling this from a public relations standpoint did not want to create a situation where there was a lack of faith in the election, where the results could not be believed, where there could be some popular movement to challenge the validity or the veracity of the election. So far, so good on that one. I think that probably it is better to have a decisive victory by someone, so that at least the people who voted and the media that was involved in the election can take responsibility for their actions and have something to reflect upon. All right, so let's see. Just wrapping up the Mars retrograde part of this. Planet retrogrades. The Mars goes retrograde again on December 6th at exactly 6.5 Leo, and then it will retrograde all the way back into the sign Cancer, where it stations direct. I think it's 17 and change Cancer, so it seems to cover a lot of ground from 6 Leo back to 17 Cancer. And this ends on February 23rd, while the sun is in Pisces. So it stretches out well into the northern hemisphere winter. And one of the exciting things about this Mars retrograde is that during the portion when it's in Cancer, it will make more squares. It already did this fairly recently, a month ago or so. It will continue to make squares both retrograde and then direct to this forming conjunction between Chiron and Eris in Aries. So this is a very rare conjunction. And because Eris moves so slowly, we will get two Chiron to Eris conjunctions in Aries. There were also two in Pisces. I checked that last night. And these conjunctions come at big moments in history. Now, what's interesting is this is the first time we're experiencing this consciously. The last conjunction of Chiron and Eris occurred in 1971. And this happened before either Chiron or Eris were discovered, but it had a palpable effect. Now, we were accustomed to, at that point, the the events of the 1960s were so complicated and tumultuous, and there were so many different things happened from so many different angles, and society just seemed to be in a constant upheaval that it was difficult to notice that there was anything special or different or new going on in the late 60s and early 70s as compared to the early 1960s. But now that we have ephemerides to be able to see these positions and conjunctions, these placements and movements for what they are, and these planets are now fairly well defined. Chiron has been around for nearly 50 years. Not quite. In 27 it'll be 50 years. And Eris has been around almost for 20 years. It was I think discovered in 2005 and named in 2006. And so we have got quite a bit of experience with Chiron and Eris. Of course, a lot of astrologers still may think that the jury is out and or haven't done very much work to figure these things out. But nonetheless, the work is there to be done and the cycles are there to be studied. So we're going to have our second conjunction of Chiron and Eris taking place between early 25 and early 26, which to me makes this one extended long era of history. And this is the first time the Chiron-Eris conjunction is happening consciously, with awareness of the existence of and named and the theme somewhat well developed of these 2 points. So it's a special event when something happens, rare happens after the planetary archetypes are known, rather than where they're kind of working in the back. And if you look at the early 1970s, it is an incredible time in history, but it's not like the Pluto-Uranus conjunction in Virgo, which was basically 65 and 66. It's a very different feeling tone, a very different vibe, and a more aggressive feeling. There was a little more self-assertion in the air, and it was a time, I think, to its great credit, when politics was not seen as the only way to think about things or to resolve things. There were many different kinds of social movements that included therapy movements and spiritual movements, something we have very little of now. It's as if the entire concept of personal, emotional, and psychological healing is gone. I mean, if you were to look at the internet, all you would see is like, lose weight here, lose weight there, belly fat, plants are poisonous, lectins, lectin's going to come get you. And it's like all basically food related, which was good to a point, and then a lot of stuff about medical scandals. People are figuring out how bad these drugs are and how bad vaccines are. It doesn't, it doesn't prevent people from consuming 6 billion prescriptions a year. God knows how many vaccines. As far as I know, that 6 billion prescriptions a year in the United States, with 1/3 of people not taking any. So that means that the 6 billion trips to the drugstore are taken by only 2/3 of the American population. This is astonishing. This is a lot of prescriptions. There's plenty of people taking 10 drugs every day. It makes my head spin, and this is at least getting some meek scrutiny. The lawsuits are coming through. There's a big Gardasil case about to go to trial next year. And if it is true that Trump is going to appoint Robert F. Kennedy to any position of oversight of the EPA and the FDA, even though I have proven several dozen times that Kennedy is completely full of shit, at least it's going to keep a discussion going. If any one person asks why I think Robert F. Kennedy is completely full of shit on these issues, I would be happy to share my writing on the subject. But I think that from some viewpoints, it'll be good to have him there because it'll keep a discussion going. But my larger point is related to Chiron and to Eris, is that the obsession is all with the physical level. Now, that's an important level, right? It's kind of a focus of consciousness. What should we be eating? How much hydrogenated oil is too much hydrogenated oil? How much high fructose corn syrup is too much high fructose corn syrup? Are almond skins really poisonous? And so on and so on. Should you just eat beef? Okay, that's all great. But our society and most of the people in it are dragging around a huge amount of spiritual, emotional, and psychological baggage that there is no real forum to address it. We hear some talk about trauma. That's not really therapy. The implication is only people who think they've been through a trauma need to somehow focus their growth. There are still taboos on therapy, but now there are taboos on therapy where there is not very much therapy, and where a great number of people, a great number of therapists are refusing to talk about some of the most important subject matter in therapy, which is sexuality, on a couple of theories. A, it's not that important. B, they might get sued for some form of malpractice or sexual abuse should they mention sex or persist in a conversation about sex. Any conversation about sex can now be cast as harassment, even though it's a conversation dedicated to healing or to one or both of the parties involved. And the third is that I think that there are hardly any people qualified to actually conduct the conversation because they just don't know enough. I mean, when I bring my Subaru in to Curry Subaru to have it worked on, I have perfect faith that the technician working on my car knows exactly what the fuck he's doing. They know exactly how tight to make those lug nuts when they rotate my tires. Right? They know how to take the headlight assembly apart and put it back in. Now, sex is not that mechanical, but it requires knowledge and experience. And the most important thing that a therapist can have who is going to discuss sex with their clientele is they have to have the words to say, and they need experience with direct experience, not merely stuff they read in a book or heard somebody give a lecture about. And finally, they have to have absolutely no shame of the subject matter. And I don't know who possibly could qualify for this. And so we have really, I see very little progress in this realm. The most I see is people pissed off about porn and saying that we've got now a very wide generation of boys that were raised on little movies. Of course, what were the girls raised on? And how do we have this conversation? Speaking of, I plan, before the sun leaves Scorpio, possibly this weekend, to do a special focus astrology discussion on matters of sexuality. Talking about my theories of sexual healing, of which I have several, I think, worthwhile ones, but specifically in the framework of astrology. Maybe that'll double as a Tantra studio, but I want to do it with an astrological focus as a special edition of STARCAST. Additionally, I will do, I think probably on Monday, a special edition of STARCAST on Trump's victory speech. Trump came out. It was a wild night Tuesday with Daniel Gimario and Jeffrey Strahl. Thank you guys, and Elijah Tuttle in the background running the whole multiple stream circus, which we've never done in Planet Waves history. That ended. I think we went 8 till about 11:45. It really looked like Trump was going to win. At some point around midnight or 12:30, I ate a little slice of Delta 8 gummy, and it was a little bit too big of a slice, but a slice, not the whole thing. And left my Bluetooth speaker on in my bedroom. I was like finally chilling in bed, but I left the speaker on loud so I couldn't fall asleep because I wanted to hear the Trump victory speech. Had to hear this. This is like, it would have been easy to go to sleep, but not very much fun. This is whether you love it or hate it. This is a real moment in American history. I mean, somebody got back the presidency after losing, convicted felon, a guy found liable for sexual assault by a civil jury, and charges of election interference still pending. This is an incredible moment that this guy not only came back into office, but with a mandate by the people, a decisive mandate. I mean, you can't throw tomatoes at that. That is actually what happened. But what you can do is you can figure out why. And by the way, I think in my article tonight, so far, I have not heard anyone or seen any bit of election analysis that describes this. I was poking around Real Clear Politics today, looking around New York Times analysis. No one mentions the digital issue. The digital issue. This is why Trump got reelected. It is why Harris completely and utterly failed. Anyway, I was pretty stoned when he came out at 2:30 in the morning. And so when that happens, I'm listening to everything in slow motion. In particular, my auditory sense and like processing time through sound is really stretched out. So I'm thinking, okay, Trump gives really long speeches. He's just been reelected president. How long is this going to go for? And it went for a while, but I listened to the whole thing and listened to him say how many times he was going to keep his promises. So I think this is actually his claiming victory, accepting the presidency, and basically we all agree that he won. The time for that is 2:30 a.m. Eastern Time, Wednesday, November 6th. And so I've got a working chart for that. It is a solid, functioning horoscope. They are not all that workable. And so there's a lot to say about this chart. So I'm planning a special edition of STARCAST for Monday on the Trump victory speech. Okay, that is, I think, most of what I have to say to you. Thank you again for making my return or day. I've done a little bit of live video, but not so much. So a debut/return to live broadcasting and live video, a tremendous success. We held our audience through the entire evening. People were not bailing out, and I knew that the edge we had was, first of all, the only live action presentation with two very experienced astrologers. Giamario is he's been at this thing 15. I don't know when he started, but he's 15 years older than me, maybe more, and knows what he's talking about. I was so impressed with his ability to just handle astrology in a way that was just easy to follow. And Jeffrey Strahl, the resident historian at Planet Waves, of a similar vintage as Giamario. So these guys had a lot of reference points that they could talk about and had in common, and had both lived through quite a bit of history that I either completely missed or was way too young to experience. On my down vest, I have finally acquired a down vest made of poplin, the right substance, and on this lovely heavy-duty piece of outdoor clothing, I have an original vintage Vietnam Veterans Against the War button, VVAW. And people say to me, "Are you a Vietnam veteran?" I'm like, "No, I'd be 80 if I was a Vietnam veteran." It starts the summer that I was born. So it's good to speak with people who are familiar with this history, and I think that both of these guys are completely obsessed with history and can carry on a real conversation. So that was a great pleasure. It would seem that we are done with Planet Waves as of concluding this recording at 3:11 p.m. on an absolutely gorgeous autumn day here. I'm having a very warm autumn. I was out the door at 7:45 this morning. I wrote the article at at about 5. The article you've got. I took a nap and then woke up and went out on an expedition to photograph lawn signs, candidates' lawn signs, and remnants of the election before they disappeared. So the one that I wanted, that fabulous spray-painted Trump sign along Route 9W, is quite a distance from my house and most of the way to Saugerties. So I headed up towards Saugerties and visited my friend Vinny at Vinny's farm stand, and then my friends at the smokehouse of the Catskills. And so I had a nice artistic photographic morning and briefly visited two of the people who helped keep my refrigerator full. All right, so I think that's it. I'm going to get back now to writing the cancer reading. I can't wait to get these into your hands. These are really the best of the annual readings I think that I have ever done. I make it a point to do them a little bit better every year and to build on what I've learned. And here we are up to the 4th reading. So I'll have more about that maybe tomorrow in a written description. Thank you for listening. If you happen to be listening on one of the remote locations, one of the podcasting sites, on YouTube, on Odyssey, on BitChute, or something like that, please consider becoming a subscriber. This part is a part of the paid subscription, but we put it various places as a promo. So you can come and visit and see what we've got going on at planetwaves.eu or planetwaves.net. Those are the two main Planet Waves astrology websites. There will be no Planet Waves FM this week. There will be one just ahead of the the full moon in Taurus. That is a little more than 1 week. All right. On that note, I leave you for now. Thank you for listening. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you to all of you who have joined recently, and to those of you who were paying subscribers who then got a 2-month break in your subscriptions. Those are starting to cycle again, and many of you gave voluntary contributions, so much appreciated. All right, moving on. Lots of love, and bye for now.